Just a warning that this manhwa will give you a lot of anger before you start liking it. The protagonist is a loser who does dungeons on crutches. Yes, he enters the dungeon on crutches and then what? Starts giving crutch hits on the monsters. His brother that he helped his whole life awakens as CES rank and turns his back on him. Spits on the plate he ate from. But of course, in the future, he will awaken some absurd powers and get revenge on everyone. Things here started exactly like in Solo Leveling. Portals all over the world. Our failure of the moment works in a moving company. With the appearance of the portals, people always want to move far away. You can even drink water on this job. Looks like a profitable business. Always profiting from other people's misfortune. The protagonist works to support his younger brother. Buy Pokemon cards and things like that. Greater than you ugly. Greater than the brother that is still in school. On a certain day when they were going to do a moving job, they noticed that one of the portals that used to be dark was now red. And since they didn't pay much attention to the road, they ended up crashing into something and it was right into Satan's cockatiel. The thing was hungry and came at them. At that moment, he thought he had lost his job and his boss. But when he looked to the side, things were even worse. Several monsters were coming out of the portal. The portals connect to dungeons and since they were not completed in time, the monsters came out to have lunch. Instantly, hundreds died in minutes. In this case, they hired the moving service to the afterlife. Perhaps it would be better to open a funeral home now. The guy was still worried about the job, so he went looking for the boss when suddenly he saw buff arms holding the monster. I didn't know that old man went to the gym. The truth is that the one holding the beast was the old man's wife. Dear, are you taking steroids? Obviously, along with the portals, awakened humans also appeared. Look at that coincidence again. Now, we're just missing Sun Jin Woo, right? But remember, I said the protagonist has a brother in school. His bus flipped over. That failure of your younger brother also awakened. He is one of the few who awakened with Shrank in the whole world. His name is Sun Jin Woo. Oh, I said it wrong. His name is Han Yu Hien. So, 8 years passed quickly. Now, a woman who awakened powers was explaining on television that they have a system window. And with this system, she can use abilities. In her case, she is the woodwoman. After that, she joined a guild to do dungeons, selling what drops inside. You can get filthy rich. I'm talking rich at the level of Elon Musk. Having money coming out of your ears. For example, in South Korea, Han Yu Hien became famous after awakening during high school and founding the Abyss Guild. He was always poor and lost his family early. But now at 25, he has money even to buy 1 can of Coke. Must make at least $600 clean per month. That girl who was just interviewed would soon become rich, too, right? Wrong. She also hired the moving service to the afterlife. She died in the middle of a dungeon. Ooh, __. You think life is a strawberry? Life is a very sour lemon. Now that I already explained all this portal and economy crap, let's go to what matters. People wanted to go to a dungeon, but something was wrong. The hunter who uses crutches of rank F called Han Yu Jin was also in that dungeon. As you must remember, this is the protagonist. Of course, he does this to survive. But the other hunters think he is a burden. Only the group leader defends him since it is cheap to hire him. And the price is cheap because he already survived multiple failed dungeons where everyone died. He is a parasite. The hunter even says he was abandoned by his brother even when he crushed his legs. This made him furious and he went forward. But in the end, he is just rank F and the other guy is ranked D. The difference in strength between them is monstrous. He should at least have thrown the crutch at the guy. At least the old group leader cares a little about him. The bald guy used a bone-strengthening skill to help him for a few hours. He knows he is a burden, but he needs this to live. So, he stands up shaking hands and praising the old man. It was enough to say a few words like, "Your baldness is beautiful." That he already got all happy. In the end, what the crutch guy wanted was to shake the old man's hand to use his ability. When he influences someone, the person is added as a target. And soon, we will find out what it is for. So, now let's go to what matters. The business is to grab the crutches and enter the dungeon. Now, inside the dungeon, the party was attacked by Pokemon like bats. Yet the hunters quickly took care of them. Even so, as the guild master urged them to stay wary, some claimed that they had nothing to fear inside a degraded dungeon. The hunters even found it laughable that 8 years ago such miserable creatures had made them run for their lives. The miserable creature in question then left them a generous gift after dying. Upon seeing the rather big mana stone, the hunters were quite pleased. The D rank then turned to our hero and urged him to hurry up with the mining, seeing as he only got 20% of whatever he dug up. Yujun found this unfair as he didn't get that much, but the hunter reminded him that he would get nothing from the stones dropped by monsters and that his only income here was mining. At that moment, the protagonist couldn't help but compare himself to Cinderella and the two bullies to her two narcissistic sisters. And with that being said, Eugene decided to suck it up while singing about how he was a damsel in distress. Now alone, he began to think about his misery and how he was abandoned by his brother after losing both their parents. Shortly after becoming a hunter, his brother left the house. Our hero urged the boy to stay with him as the outside was dangerous. But he didn't pay him any mind. After some time, as the protagonist was drafted into the military, his younger brother created high on his own guild, which quickly became the #1 in the nation. And just like that, the protagonist was once again abandoned. Eugene was now all alone in the world. For that reason, he began to crave an awakening, thinking that it would change everything. And so, our hero abandoned everything and invested his entire savings into a broker who convinced him with his sweet tongue that he could get him an awakening. Yet to everyone's shock, the older brother of the #1 Korean hunter turned out to be a meaningless Frank. Rumors began to spread about how the weakling was trying to leech off his younger brother and how he had lied to the investors. At the end of it all, the protagonist found himself the favorite target of the media as well as under a mountain of debt. His younger brother was quite ashamed of the scandal he had caused and mocked his power. Yu Yun even claimed that the one who had raised him was a total disgrace. His bad luck didn't end there as it led to a leg injury while raiding a dungeon. The younger brother didn't even lend his caretaker one of his healers to help with his injury and pointed out how this should stop him from raiding ever again. With that being said, the one who had it all ordered the one with nothing to stop dragging his name through the mud. For that reason, the protagonist was mining like a slave nowadays. Yu Hyun felt hollow inside, but in the end, he claimed he understood his brother for ditching him, as at the end of the day, he couldn't fully deny the fact that he was nothing but an frank hunter trying to leech off his younger brother. The job, however, was particularly dangerous, and the only reason an F rank like our hero was still alive was because of his special power. Yu Yun was known as the custodian. This allowed him to take some people into his entourage. The people in question were Yu Yun, whom he had spent his entire life caring for, as well as those who became good friends to him. His skill was easy to use, as it only required him to say 3 simple magic words in order to bring people under his care. Once their custodian, the protagonist would be able to provide his targets with all kinds of buffs. But in the end, this was never enough as he was nothing but an F-rank hunter with frank powers. Yukian had a secret technique up his sleeve that allowed him to survive impossible scenarios even when all of his teammates were wiped off the map. His survival had nothing to do with luck. In fact, he was only able to survive due to a hidden power that came with his title of custodian. That power alone allowed someone as weak as our protagonist to survive the literal impossible. This skill was known as Final Thanks. But as the skill in question was activated out of nowhere, our hero was left startled. In his great search for power, it suddenly filled his entire body. It didn't take our hero long to realize that this was the energy of the guild master. At that moment, his heart dropped to his feet. He rushed in panic, thinking about how this should be a safe D-rank dungeon. With the power of Final Thanks, the protagonist would acquire double the abilities and stats of the one under his wing for a short amount of time. In other words, if the one under our hero's wing was quite powerful, even the frank hunter could temporarily become a titan. But this power wasn't all rainbows and sunshine as it had a pretty dark requirement to be activated. This requirement was directly linked to the one under the protagonist custody. Yujun refused to believe that anything had happened to the guild master when all of a sudden he stepped into a pool of blood. For Final Thanks to be activated, it required the one under his custody to lose his life. At that moment, our hero was left horrified as his dear guild master was now a lifeless corpse on the ground. Desperate screams for help forced him to look up. The dank from before was now inside a giant dragon's mouth. The hunter was fully aware that such a strong monster shouldn't exist inside a D-grade dungeon and blamed it all on the curse of the Frank. And just like that, the one in red was torn to shreds. That horrifying creature was none other than the Dragon King of Venom and Curse, Rochius. That creature who definitely didn't belong in such a low-ranked dungeon was an all-powerful undefeated dragon that no one had ever successfully slain before. And to make things worse, our Frank who couldn't even walk straight was now forced to face it all alone. He was still unable to wrap his head around the fact that one of the safest dungeons was now housing a literal Tier 1 dragon. So, in order to escape, our hero used a skill that allowed him to strengthen his legs. He was now using the doubled version of his guild master's power in order to try his best to escape. His goal was simple, to flee the dungeon as fast as possible. But what seemed like a possible goal was quickly crushed by the wiggle of a tail. The dragon had blocked the exit. In front of the incoming attack, the protagonist decided to shield himself by strengthening his arms, but the beast didn't even try and was able to easily fling him away. Eugene then crashed onto the ground. Shortly after, he started vomiting blood. Even with the enhanced power of his guild master, the protagonist was still far too pitiful to take on the three-headed dragon. Final thanks then started to pour the last moments of the boss into his head. It made him see how the hunter who bullied him tried his best to buy the old man some time, but before he could even realize it, the monster had already attacked. And just like that, blood splattered everywhere as screams echoed in the cave. Such horrendous memories left the hero horrified. His legs had now given out, wounded and in front of the Tier 1 dragon. Eugene had no way to escape. But despite knowing fully well that he stood no chance, our protagonist wasn't ready for death just yet. Suddenly, a powerful attack hit the beast. By a twist of fate, a savior came to the rescue of our hero. It was none other than his younger brother, the S-rank hunter. Eugene hit his older brother behind a stone and urged him to stand down, but the hero tried to warn him about the three-headed beast. With that being said, the strongest hunter in Korea braced himself for the fight. He resorted to one of his powers. A storm of feathers then appeared as he used his skill, Blue Willows. With that being said, he gracefully jumped into the air and unleashed a series of quick attacks that the beast just couldn't keep up with. The prodigy then used one of his other abilities, allowing him to turn his blade black. The dark flames had been summoned. He then proceeded to channel all of that power into one point before inflicting a devastating strike upon one of the three heads of the monster. Eugene was baffled by the speed of his younger brother as it was the first time that he had seen an elite hunter fight. Eugene then quickly noticed the second head preparing something, and at the last minute the young man was able to evade the incoming attack. He warned him about this being a toxic poison with no known antidote. Eugene then stepped in for his older brother and used his Titan shield in order to protect him from the poison. Even so, he himself didn't come out unscathed. Seeing this, the older brother was horrified for Eugene while the younger brother stood tall. The elite hunter then unleashed a series of powerful slashes, desperately trying to damage the beast. But to the brother's horror, the blade had started to melt. Eugene quickly realized that his brother couldn't fight at full power. Seeing how he was too busy protecting him, it was at this moment that our hero realized that he was weighing the S-rank hunter down. Eugene, in a fit of anger, turned to his older brother and screamed at him for returning to the dungeon, even after breaking his legs. He even blamed the carnage on him and affirmed that he was tired of making up for his mistakes. Eugene screamed at his brother to stop trying and just give up. Hearing this from his brother in such a crucial moment greatly shocked our hero. It was at this moment that he understood that his brother didn't want him as a dead weight around. Eugene, who had hoped that Eugene came to help him in the name of their brotherhood, was reminded of how useless he was. And thus, he decided to confront Eugene about it. Eugene stood up on his feet. He summoned his blade while asking his younger brother if he was tired of having someone as useless as him around. And before the S-rank hunter could even realize it, the mad Frank charged at the Tier 1 dragon and stabbed it. The attention of the beast was now fully concentrated on the little insect. Eugene claimed that since he was such a dead weight for his brother, he would rather die here and now. He even stated that by ending up in the Valley of the Beast, he would save his brother from having to hold a funeral for him. The protagonist even pointed out that the Guild of Yahello would be glad to learn about his death. And so, with that being said, as the monster rushed at him, he decided to accept his fate in peace. Yujun felt alarmed and resorted to all of his power in order to try and save his older brother. And just like that, the powerful hunter clashed with the unslayable beast. But in the end, it was human blood that soaked into the ground. The protagonist was stunned, and after realizing what just happened, he found himself in front of his younger brother, impaled by the claws of the beast. At that moment, Eugene began to wonder where it all went wrong. In childhood, the two brothers were extremely close, and after being orphaned, they practically became inseparable. Despite the grief, the older brother always kept a smile in front of the younger one. Eugene decided to spare no effort in raising his younger brother, as back then, it was only the two of them against the world. Now, as tragedy occurred once again, Eugene found himself holding an impaled Eugene. Our hero was unable to understand the sacrifice of his younger brother. Even so, the hunter was successfully able to take down one of the three heads. At that moment, the genius explained to his flesh and blood how the dragon could only stay awake for 5 hours, and that 4 had already passed. And as he pointed out that after an hour, the protagonist could safely escape. This one was left extremely confused. After all, this was the same brother who didn't visit him after his injury and even discarded him in his moment of need. Yu Yun, who tried pushing his brother to give up, was now giving him a gate stone, an item that would successfully allow him to escape. Yu Yun affirmed that Yu Yun should be the one to use it after they patched his injuries. But to his horror, the said rank hunter affirmed that it would be useless, as they both knew very well that he wasn't going to make it out of this dungeon. And with that being said, Yu Hun finally closed his eyes. Yu Hun was completely stunned. At that moment, it was triggered. Final thanks had been activated and would last for an entire 60 minutes. With the death of the number 1 Korean hunter, the protagonist would now be able to benefit from double his powers. And just like that, Eugene acquired immeasurable strength as explosive power started to flow inside of his body. The beast decided to end what it had started. Yet, as it tried to crush the human, the hunter used his blue willow in order to swiftly escape. Eugene successfully put some distance between him and the beast. Eugene then hugged his brother. He could sense the power coursing through his veins. With his newfound abilities, he decided to craft a weapon. The custodian now had a spear in hand. He even asked the monster if it truly wanted to attack him as he was now. As the dragon charged at him, the hero took a deep breath. He then jumped out of the way before stabbing one of the heads. He claimed that the monster was incredibly fast. After all, he was now twice as strong as the best hunter in all of Korea. With that, one head had been taken out, and only 2 were left. Finally, the custodian was shown the memories of his younger brother and how he decided not to associate with him after discovering his Frank. Yu Hoon was fully aware that if his brother was discovered as his weakness, those people would desperately try to target him. While under the effects of the flashback, the protagonist charged at the monster. With his incredible speed, he quickly jumped onto the head of the dragon. Now in the air, he braced himself to launch a powerful strike. At that very moment, he started to see how his younger brother asked his men to keep a close eye on him, as he would be lacking protection as a hunter. When Yu Hun was hospitalized, Yu Hoon was overwhelmed by wrath and demanded that those who hurt his brother be taken care of. At that moment, our protagonist unleashed a powerful slash on the dragon. On the day he kicked his brother out of his establishment, Yu Hoon ordered his men to give him some money before driving him off. The young man was desperate to keep his custodian away from the dangers of the dungeons. Yu Yun hated himself for the way he was treating Yu Yun, but this was the only way he had to protect him. Back in the present, everything was now quiet. The 3-headed dragon had finally been slain. Even so, the winner couldn't find any happiness in victory. After all, he had just realized that he had failed to see how much his younger brother had sacrificed for him. Finally, his strength was about to reach its end, which would allow the poison of the dragon to finish off the remaining brother. But just as the protagonist decided to accept his fate, the system suddenly informed him that he had made an achievement by slaying a dragon by himself. With that, the custodian acquired the legendary title Dragon Slayer. For his incredible feat, he would now acquire 10 gate stones, 5 tier 1 enchantment drafts, and the Red Dragon Great Sword. On top of that, the system gave him a stone that could grant him 1 wish. It didn't take our hero long to come up with a wish. But as he tried to wish his brother back, it turned out that the stone doesn't meddle in the affairs of the dead. With that, the grieving man deemed this item to be worthless. But only then did he come to a realization. He realized he wished to become someone even stronger than his brother, someone who could become #1 worldwide. All of that for the sake of protecting what he holds dear and more. Thus, he was able to come up with a wish. Eugene desired to travel back to a time when his brother was still alive. After giving it some thought, he even wished to return to a time before his awakening. The protagonist couldn't care less if this decision was a bad one. In the end, he finally made up his mind and confirmed his wish. Just like that, the stone started to turn back time. Eugene Han's goal was to stop the countless tragedies that occurred from ever happening. After a short while, the protagonist finally woke up. He wasn't in the dungeon anymore. The custodian quickly realized that he was in the headquarters of his younger brother. Seeing how he couldn't open his status window, it seemed like time had truly turned back. The hero then took a look at his phone and confirmed that he was now 5 years in the past. Eugene recalled how on this day he wanted to see an awakening broker. He couldn't help but deem himself pathetic as back then he took out some of his savings in order to try and become a hunter, failing to see that this was a scam. It was at this moment that he realized something. Eugene, who was now supposed to enter the room, heard the door open. As the protagonist turned, he found someone eager to scold him. Upon seeing a young Eugene asking him to stop making a mockery out of him, the hero couldn't help but tear up. His brother was once again alive. Eugene Han's wish had truly been granted. Eugene was left utterly confused, only to become even more intrigued by his brother apologizing. Our hero claimed that he deeply regretted his actions. Seeing this, the younger brother assumed that the custodian had messed up big time, only for him to claim that it wasn't the case. Eugene pointed out how he had just realized that his brother was barely in his 20s. He even began blaming himself for failing to realize how much his brother had suffered alone while cleaning those terrifying dungeons. The protagonist promised to stay put from now on in order not to cause the S-rank hunter any more trouble. Eugene was deeply moved by this and he could finally have his big brother back. Despite realizing how cringe this moment was, the protagonist couldn't help but enjoy it. Now he finally had the chance to fix his relationship with his brother so that they could become inseparable once again. Eugene then expressed his love to the boy he had raised. Having finally learned his place, he decided to behave from now on and stay away from the hunting world and the dungeons. Suddenly, the system congratulated him on becoming an awakener. Eugene had a hard time processing this. To make things even more confusing, he acquired the titles Dragon Slayer and Perfect Custodian. He also gained a new skill known as Super Nanny. According to the system, Eugene's growth rate had now been doubled, seeing how he was under our hero's custody, leaving him quite intrigued. Sometime later, the meal was placed on the stove. Eugene was almost finished cooking. Our protagonist felt extremely out of place. In the original timeline, this marked a major dispute between him and his younger brother. Yet, now things were different. He was happy to have reconciled with him, but still found it weird that they were now sharing dinner. Eugene then turned his attention toward his status window. As the timeline restarted, he had received a new awakening, much different from the previous one. He had acquired the L-rank Dragon Slayer title, which could only be granted to the one who killed the beast alone. The custodian quickly realized that this was the mark he had gotten from the beast, and felt as if something was odd, as this shouldn't have happened at this time. The protagonist then quickly understood that the rank L referred to legendary, which was superior to the Shrank. To make things even better, this title had 4 skills. These new powers left their wielder shocked. Our protagonist had acquired L-rank resistance to poison and curses, as well as 2 other skills that would make him greatly efficient against all dragons. Eugene Han had gotten quite excited. He started to think of himself as the protagonist of one of those stories where you would become the strongest in the world after traveling in time. With that being said, he started to fantasize about it. Eugene imagined Yu Yun getting overpowered by the dragon. And just as they thought that they were about to get killed by the poison, something unbelievable would happen. A miraculous savior would enter the scene. Our hero would then pull off a cool big brother moment as he was desperate to gain some aura in front of his genius of a little brother. Yujun was certain that he was now comparable to a superhero. In fact, he rushed to check his grade, thinking that he was now S-ranked or even L-ranked. Yet, there was no denying the stats. Eugene was still frank. Having realized that this wasn't one of the typical isekai stories, he began to panic, thinking that he would be useless once again. He was so disappointed that he started to think that L in fact referred to loser. The custodian had acquired some new E-rank buffs that were superior to his older ones, but nothing that stood out. On the bright side, his custodian title had ascended to the legendary grade. Due to that, he had acquired 3 new skills. Despite its power, Final Thanks was a skill that he wished to never see again. The first new power was known as Super Nanny, which allows the user to boost the growth rate of the target for 3 days by speaking the keywords. Eugene found it similar to his old power, but decided to check the growth rate boost, and to his shock, it turned out to be a whopping 2 times. Eugene realized that this would be greatly beneficial for Yu-Hen, especially when combined with the skill, Who's a Good Boy? A new power that would allow the user to boost the stats of his target by speaking the keyword in front of an intelligent audience capable of understanding it. In other words, speaking the keywords in front of a crowd of 100 would grant the S-rank hunter 100% increase in all stat points. Thus, if Eugene cheered for his younger brother in front of 100 people, his strength was bound to double. The big brother was particularly happy with this skill as it would allow his brother as well as the rest of his guild to gain great power that would stun everyone. Hyen would become the #1 guild, and seeing how he was responsible for putting it on top, the hero would be revered by it as a king. But just as things started to go right for our protagonist, the keyword was revealed to be I love you. Out of nowhere, the older brother started to bang his head on the table as this couldn't get any more embarrassing. He quickly realized that the keyword must have changed when he restarted the timeline. Yet, every time he used the keyword on anyone he met, he was bound to have a lovely night in jail with the police. Seeing how this skill was unusable, the hero decided to check the final one. The final power would allow the protagonist to see the potential rank of an unawakened target and awaken their full potential by chanting the keyword. But just as he was deep in his thoughts, dinner was finally done. His brother gave him some rice. Yu-In wasn't sure if Yu-Hin would like the food, seeing how it was made from leftovers in the fridge. But the hero's reaction said it all. Yu-Hin was happy to see his brother enjoy the food, and he happily stated that there was more in Japan. Yu-Hin didn't expect his brother to be able to cook and was in fact intrigued by it as he was rich enough to eat out. Yu-Hin stated that it was safer, and back then he didn't have poison antidotes or curse-lifting items when he started his journey. This made the older brother realize that some people had tried to poison the younger one in the past. According to Yu-Hin, some must have grown envious of his great talent despite his young age. After all, most big guilds sold themselves to giant corporations for the sake of progress while he built his empire on his own. And as Yuan pointed out that he would have been better off joining one of the big guilds, he was suddenly grabbed by the face. Yu-Hin was quite angry that his brother had kept such crucial information from him. The early hunter urged the Frank not to judge him, as in the end, this was the life he had chosen. The 20-year-old then expressed that his biggest regret was the fact that his relationship with his brother had deteriorated. Yu-Hin was forced to keep a close eye on his brother while pretending not to like him in order to keep bad people from hurting him. The young man even claimed that he kept all of this a secret in order not to become a dead weight for his brother. But as it turned out, he admitted that he was wrong. Yu-In was deeply touched by his brother's apology and how he expressed his love for him, especially after he had given him the cold shoulder. Seeing his little brother act like this, the older one immediately filled up his plate as he didn't know what else to do. Yu-In Huan was grateful to have reversed time, claiming it to be the best decision of his life. At that moment, the younger brother decided to take his leave. But before that, he urged the protagonist to delete the broker's number, seeing as he wouldn't be answering the phone anytime soon. Way too afraid to find out what his brother truly meant by this, our hero immediately obeyed. As the guild master was leaving, Yu-In promised to clean up everything before taking his leave. But his brother didn't quite understand. Yu-In explained to him that he was to stay here. In fact, not only was our hero going to live with him from now on, but he was now even forbidden from ever leaving. Yu-In had a hard time understanding this as somehow he had become his brother's hostage. After fathoming this, our protagonist demanded an explanation. So, his brother simply pointed out that the outside was far too dangerous. Everything was now different for our hero as he had fixed his relationship with his younger brother. In other words, he was now a walking target for his many enemies who would be eager to kill him. Well, that meant the custodian was forbidden from exiting the house. Yet, on the bright side, he would get to live in the luxurious apartment of his younger brother. Yet unable to accept this truth, Eugene rushed to the door, only to quickly find himself behind bars. At that moment, a mailman entered the room and urged the protagonist to sign the form so he could get the items he had requested. As it turned out, Eugene didn't waste a second and called a moving company to empty his brother's apartment and move everything. Here, Eugene didn't understand why his caretaker wasn't okay with the plan, as he had already agreed to all of this. The moment he had apologized to him and forgiven him for the cold shoulder, everything was set. According to the 20-year-old, by doing this, his brother had agreed to become his prisoner. Yet, Eugene, with a little bit of defiance left in him, affirmed that it wasn't the case. Just like that, the custodian found himself alone, trapped in a cage of gold. At some point, he started to assume that his brother had gone mad. After that, he had reversed time. Without wasting a minute, our hero packed a bag of essentials and decided to leave the house before his brother returned. But just as he was about to exit through the front door, he suddenly stumbled upon someone. In front of this giant gorilla-like man, our protagonist could only shiver. That person was Sunning Kim, the right-hand man of Eugene and an A-rank hunter with capable defensive powers. When asked if he could pass, the F-rank hunter was denied exit. Eugene couldn't help but find this ridiculous as his brother went as far as giving him an A-rank hunter as a warden. Our hero tried to argue his way out and claimed that the man should care less about what he did. And so, seeing this, Sunning Kim decided to adopt a different approach, which was intimidation. And from the looks of it, it seemed to be working very well. Now in front of a higher-level hunter, our hero couldn't help but feel like a small rabbit in front of a giant grizzly bear. Even so, he tried his best to remain calm. Only then did one of his new skills known as Resist Fear kick in. With its power, the custodian stopped shaking in his boots. In fact, he wasn't afraid at all. Now, even the intimidating A-rank hunter seemed more like an oversized plushie. And so, seeing